It's Taste of Country Nights with Evan Paul on demand, season 3, episode 12 with Mark Miller from Sawyer Brown.
But the 80s, we started out, Step That Step was a number one record in 1985. And if you listen to that record, you go, there's no way that was played on country radio in 1985. And it was a number one song. But that kind of, you kind of feel like you have a license to do whatever you want. And you don't.
We had a great conversation here. A lot of fun with Mark Miller from Sawyer Brown. We talked a lot about the 80s and the 90s and country. He dropped a Toby Keith story on us. It's just a fun interview. And if you want to hear some interviews with some of your favorite country music icons from the past, just check out Taste of Country Nights on demand. Last week we had Chris Young hanging out with us. The week before, Keith Urban. The week before that, Dierks Bentley. Just search for past episodes. Just go to Taste of Country Nights on demand, part of the Town Square Media Podcast Network. Taste of Country Nights, hanging out with Mark Miller, Sawyer Brown, of course. You might have heard of him.
Yeah.
A few albums. Now you have your current one is Sawyer Brown, Desperado Troubadours.
Yeah.
A couple Heaters album starts with. Yeah. Under This Old Hat, especially. You got some depth on there, though, like Socrates, songs like that. What you shared was partially inspired by the death of your mom. How important to you is being remembered as a band that's more than just a fun, energetic stage show, like with songs like The Walk and stuff?
I think all of it encompasses who we are. I think everybody has a personality that you like to think that you're a rocker. Uh-huh. And then you have the sentimental part, and it's no different than a band, I think. So, we've always been known for up-tempo rockin' shows, and I think when we released The Walk kind of gave a different view to the fans and the American public of the band, and then we had songs like All These Years and some other ballads that were really big hits for us. But I think to sustain you kind of have to have all of that.
Yeah, you have to be like well-rounded and have okay. And take it for someone in a band who's has sustained is definitely you. You know what you're doing. Blake Shelton produced this record. How did that come together?
Man, this is our 40-year anniversary tour, and so we knew we wanted to do some projects. My brother, who's our manager, had read a People magazine article. And Blake had said Sawyer Brown was his first concert, and The Race Is On was the first record he ever bought. So somebody contacted him, and he called me in 5 minutes, and he goes, "Man, I want to do this. I'm in." And so
had you ever talking to Blake before?
I had just seen him like when you do shows and stuff, these festivals in passing. But had never really sat down and talked to him.
So you get a phone call from a number you don't recognize.
Yeah,
and you pick it up and he's like, "Hey, man."
Yeah, it's Blake. He goes, they asked me about producing your record. He goes, "Man, I'm in."
Whoa.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And it was great. So I went out. We hung out in Oklahoma at his place, and we kind of talked through what what it was going to sound like. That was important to me. And he's such a historian of the band. It was really like just bringing another band member into the studio because he knew the sound and he knew who we were. And
wow.
He came in. We camped out in the studio. He and Gwen flew in from L.A. We cut it here in Nashville, and Mac McAnally, played on the record, and it was just it was just really like just a cool Sawyer Brown. We'd cut most of our stuff in Muscle Shoals over the years. But it had that vibe. It had that definite, old school vibe.
What's like serious producer Blake like behind the scenes? Because we don't get to see that a lot.
He's still funny. He's really smart. He's really funny. But there was a couple of times where I felt like he saved the song because we were kind of flailing out there, and then he was kind of able to say, hey, let's break it down. Let's just go in with a piano and a vocal and start there. And then it really saved the song. But there were just moments like that in the studio that he was huge.
But then he would he like be like, man, I saved that song for you.
No.
Okay.
Not like that. But he is funny because at one point he goes, when we're running down a song and he and I were in the control room and the band was in playing it, he goes, are all of them even playing the same song?
You're like, am I offended? Or
yeah, it's like,
who else did you help mentor or bring on the road for you back in the day that turned out to be a huge superstar?
Toby Keith.
Wow.
Toby was out for about 1.5 years with us. Tim McGraw was out for quite some time. We had, Kenny Chesney was on some shows. LeAnn rhymes. So
give me some Toby Keith as an opener stories.
Toby was the best. Okay, now Toby, and I miss him so much. Close friend. I was at his last show in Vegas. But Toby is hilarious, number one. And Toby is, he's a funny guy. He's a redneck. And we would get invited we love to play golf. So we would get invited, being the show in town, to these country clubs and stuff. So we'd go walking in. We would be invited. We would go walking in, and Toby would go, hey, look at how all they're looking at us. I said, Toby, no one's looking at us, man. Yeah, they just looking down their nose at us. I said, Toby, no one's looking down their nose at us. But it was like, that was kind of, so we get out, and this is like a historic country club. We get out on the first tee box, and there's 4 older gentlemen out in the fairway getting ready to hit their next shot. And Toby goes, oh, man, we ain't going to wait on these guys all day. So he just whistles real loud, and they all turn around, and they look at us, and he just makes this motion like we're coming through.
Whoa.
And they just like parted, and we got up and hit. I said, man, you're killing me.
Wow. At this like really scale country.
Oh, yeah. But that was Toby. Toby felt comfortable in his own skin anywhere we were.
Yeah. That's great. This Side of the Sky is a big song for anyone that's lost a parent. Are you a man who has a lot of hope for the next generation, or are you someone that kind of fears for your kids and grandkids?
Oh, I think I have both. I think if you don't have a fear, then you're not cautious. I think we all have to be cautious and look around. But I also have hope that hopefully that whatever is in our DNA that we've passed on is at some point has to rise to the top. And I know that I'm a product of my mom. I'm a product of my grandfather. And I know, they were blue collar. My mom was a teacher. My grandfather was a farmer. So I definitely have hope. Definitely have hope.
Okay, that's good. The Bellamy Brothers were just here recently. They talked about how their song "Country Rap" was like misinterpreted. They originally were making fun of rap music, and then it became like its own song. Have you ever had anything from your catalog that's been misunderstood or misrepresented?
Wow. Well, we were totally misunderstood in the early days because we were a country rock band, leaning a little more heavy on rock. Trying to find a place on country radio. So I could probably say, we probably released, 8 or 10 songs that were misunderstood.
Wow.
That did not, we couldn't get them played. But, we would have a huge hit, and then we would have a string of, 3 or 4 that we couldn't even get charted, because we kept pushing the envelope.
And they just weren't ready for it.
And then when the 90s came around, we hit our stride. We had kind of figured it out. But the 80s, we started out. Step That Step was a number one record in 1985, and if you listen to that record, you go, "There's no way that was played on country radio in 1985," and it was a number one song. But that kind of. But you kind of feel like you have a license to do whatever you want, and you don't.
Do you have any good 80s and 90s rocker stories? Like, did you ever hang out with Slash and stuff, or any celebrities?
Oh yeah, well, see, like David Lee Roth called me one night after a show, and he had seen us on Star Search, and it was just. I thought it was somebody punking me at first, because somebody said, "Hey, man," it was in the production office. They said, "David Lee Roth is on the phone and wants to talk to you." So I get on there and goes, "Hey, man, it's David Lee Roth." I went, "Holy cow, it's David Lee Roth." And he goes, "Hey, man, like, dude, I'm watching Star Search, man, and I'm digging what you're doing." But he goes, "I can't figure out if it's country or if it's rock, man." And he goes, "I just want to tell you," he said, "Man, come on over." He said, "The water's fine. If you guys want to just come on over to rock, come on, man, just bring it."
And you think you're getting pranked?
Yeah, and it was David Lee.
You're like, "Okay, man, thanks."
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Oh man, what was it like being on Star Search? I mean, that was the original, original everything, American Idol.
Yeah. Well, man, it was. You know what? We went from playing the clubs to being on national TV overnight, and you don't really, realize the impact until you like go out in public after it's aired. And at that point, there was just only 3 networks. So the audience was huge.
Yeah. What was your first start? Were you 3.75?
375.
Really?
Yeah. Somebody didn't give us that extra point.
Okay. And then when you won it, what was that? How did that alter, your career?
The win. Oh, when we won it?
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, we hadn't signed anything with anybody. So we were really able to write our own ticket.
So the phone calls just started coming in the day after it aired?
We were out there. We were like, on 20-some shows. So after the 5th show, for some reason, the 5th show, I woke up. I'm at the Hyatt on Sunset in L.A. We were out there for like 6.5 months. I wake up at 7 o'clock in the morning and the phone's ringing, and it's Nashville calling, And what had happened was all these record companies had passed on us because of the way we looked, our antics on stage, and the LA offices were going, "Hey, why don't you guys know about this band?" And they're having to say, "Well, we do. We actually passed on them."
Oh yeah.
And so now they're all having to backpedal. So they're all calling up, and so that was pretty cool. But it was it was crazy of what television did. Especially at that time for our career.
Are you going to make us fans wait 20 more years for another record, or what's?
You know what? I kind of got this has kind of been fun. I kind of got the bug, and I've kind of got a few more ideas running around. So, we've never stopped touring. So, we've toured for 40 years. That COVID was the only time we ever had any time off. This year's a 100-city tour, and so I could see another album in the not so far future.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any people that you want to work with and rekindle? Any songs that you want to redo?
No, I don't think there's any songs. I always like to move on. Even like when we've had a hit song, I've never tried to repeat that sound. I've always tried to just move on. But there's a lot of artists, man, that Cody Jinks and I wrote a couple songs. I could see that happening some more with Cody. We connected pretty cool, but I just love to continue to tour and if we make an album, that's fine. But I always get to see on tour, because we're always doing these festivals, all all my friends. That you've had over the years. So that's always pretty cool.
Cool, man. Well, we're loving the album. That's a really good treat for everyone. Thanks for putting it out.
Thank you, man.
All right, let's bring in Billy Dukes from behind the camera to talk about this interview here. How's it going, man?
Good. Mark Miller of Sawyer Brown, man. I knew this would be a good interview, and he didn't disappoint. He's just good energy.
Yeah, I really liked him. It wasn't what I expected. He's and I mean, obviously you can't see him on the podcast, but the guy didn't look like he should. He didn't look as old, if I'm allowed to say that, as he should. He looked really good. Like a lot of times some of the legends will come in here and you're like, oh man, they've been rode hard, put away wet. But this guy was a nice guy.
What was the one thing you wanted to ask him about above all else?
I wanted to know, like, stories from before social media, like, because that's where it's at, man. For those 90s, 80s, 90s artists, like, I feel like they have so many stories in their head that'll never get told, and they're just lost. So I really, if I could have just sat down and just everything. Like, I want to know the time that he hung out with Clint Eastwood or something, and he has.
Yeah, I think, like, people feel like an obligation to keep those stories quiet, but there's always that one artist or two artists who will tell all the stories, almost like a jelly roll type character. Who's the jelly roll of the 80s that just has no filter? That's what we need to find out.
That's right, yeah. Yeah, I bet people will say, like, Martina McBride. She's come up a couple times, and who's the best drinking partner from back in the day?
I was really curious about Blake Shelton producing the album, because Blake, he doesn't produce albums. He doesn't even really produce his own albums. So I kind of wondered, like, what's his ear like? Is he like a boss in the studio, or is he still sort of a goofball?
Yeah, I thought that was interesting to get that side of it from from Mark, because you don't get that. All you get is the jokey side from Blake. So to hear how serious Blake is in the studio is really cool, and it's something that I don't know that we would have ever really got that, because I don't know. Yeah, has Blake produced any other albums before?
I mean, to an extent, I think an artist of his stature co-produces all of his albums, whether he's credited or not. But when you think about Blake's music, it's not sonically rich, if you know what I'm saying. And I don't mean that sort of as a way of dissing his music, but like, the songs lean a little traditional typically. Sonically, there's not like as many layers as like a Sam Hunt song, certainly. Or even like Chris Young is a good example. He just dropped his album. Like, you listen to a Chris Young album, if you really pick it apart, you can hear like a lot of different instrumentation, things going back and forth. Like, Blake kind of keeps it simple. So you take him to a Sawyer Brown, who is a little bit more dynamic when it comes to a production. I don't know. I mean, how does he get that job, and is he capable of doing that, I guess?
Yeah, maybe there's more to Blake than meets the eye,
Sure.
And I guess we're finding out about that. Maybe sometimes it's like a coach. Sometimes the coach can coach, but he can't do it. This is like the opposite. He doesn't really do that, is kind of what you're saying, in his own music, but he knows what it should sound like. So, this is another side. And then I wonder now if Blake is going to be more instrumental in like Gwen's music. If she puts out another solo record, is he now the producer for a lot? Is that what Blake's going to seg into, or is this a one-off?
Now that would be something, because Gwen's music is like, you couldn't get further away from from Blake's music,
right? Like, I want to hear Blake do "Holla Back Girl" Part 2, produce. Right.
I don't feel like your Blake Shelton impression got enough love during the interview, but you had like one line, and it was good. Like, I thought.
I don't even want to try and do it again, man, because I won't be able to match it.
Just the spotlight's on you, but at some point, if you could slip it in here in the next few minutes, I'll when you're ready. I don't want to put any pressure on you.
Okay.
And this album, it's a solid album. It's really strong. Like, a lot of times, an older artist, when they kind of make this comeback album, they might kind of like round up the old team and try to go back in studio with the old players and the old producer, and they'll create an album.
Yeah.
And I can think of a superstar who's done this. They'll create an album that sounds very much like it came from that era when they were big. But the artists, I think, who do it best, and we had Shannon Odoa in, and they did this, and certainly Sawyer Brown has, like, they find a way to take their old sound and style, but contemporize it a little bit.
Are they using, so do you think that, because I always wonder when artists do that, are they using those same instruments that they got that same sound out of? So do you think like these are Sawyer Brown's same instruments that they played 20 years ago on their last record, and then they just add stuff to it to make it sound more modern or current?
Well, now that's an interesting question. If Sawyer Brown, like if the band actually plays on the album, and I would guess not. I would guess Mark Miller probably enlisted some modern session players, and a lot of bands do that. You know, Rascal Flatts never played on their albums, and most bands don't play on their albums. But that's an interesting question. Did the rest of the guys actually? I don't know the answer to that.
What you mean Rascal Flatts don't play on their own album? What do? They just kind of stand there?
Well, all three of them sang, so they did the vocals, but like until later in their career, Joe Don Rooney wasn't playing guitar on the album. You know, they would have session players, or at least he wasn't the main player.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's interesting because Luke Combs has told me recently that he got like his first cut where he was playing the guitar on his album, and I thought he like glitched. I was like, what do you mean, man? This is like your third. That makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, no, that's kind of a rarity. I think Chris Jansen too actually just shared that on his new single. He got to do the guitar solo, and he's never gotten to do that before, so that's kind of a one-off.
Interesting, but then like Brad Paisley's and Keith Urban's of the world are playing their own?
Yeah. Well, 100% they're on their own. Yeah,
okay.
That's the way that works. I was glad you asked about Star Search, because that was a little bullet point in his career. Here's the other thing I really wanted to know about Mark Miller, and I didn't have the gall to put it on your sort of list of questions. Like, he created this music video for a song called Thank God for You that was released in like the early 90s, late 80s. And it is like the cheesiest music video to watch back now. Like, there's a scene where he has like this dance breakdown with a push broom. And like he has like this girl in the room with him watching, and like he's trying to seduce her, but it's like 4 or 5 guys around this 1 or 2 girls. It's kind of like, I kind of wonder like if they watch back their old music videos, like what they
I'm sure. I feel like that's with anything. Yeah, I'm sure they go back and look and go like, oof.
But you never know. Like I didn't know if he'd be like, oh, I loved that music video, still proud of that one.
Yeah.
I didn't want to like set you up for like one of those situations where you're like trying to backtrack off of it.
Yeah. What do you mean dancing with a broom isn't cool? What do you?
Yeah. No, I should have won the CMA that year for that.
Yeah, I totally get it. I mean, that is something you got to wonder about too. And the technology has come a long way from there too. You know, like, as far as, you know, it goes the same way as like if you watch an old Star Wars, you know, the CGI on that, you wonder if they go back. I'm sure his answer would be like, you know, when that was coming out, that was hot, man. And, you know, that's what we do, you know. But yeah, I don't think they would put that out now. But then that's what gets interesting when these bands come back and dabble back into the genre 20 years later, because it's almost like a bear coming out of hibernation.
Do you ever watch movies like that you saw as a kid and like find a scene that is just clearly like a racist joke that like you never dawned on? And popular, and I got one in mind, but like popular movies that you like watch back now and you're like, oh my, no, that shouldn't have been a thing. That we shouldn't be doing that.
Everything. I mean, everything from the 80s and 90s is so sketchy. Like, you know, it just shows how far we've come, and you know that's good and bad depending on who's listening.
Thinking of National Lampoon's Vacation, where they go to Wally World, and there's that scene where Clark Griswold has the security guard like on the ground, like begging for his, like, it's just really a bad look.
Yeah.
Now, I liked how Mark didn't necessarily, I don't know, sometimes an artist of a certain genre or a certain age he'll boast about like certain artists opening up for him. But that wasn't the case with him. You kind of had to pull it out of him a little bit that Tim McGraw, Kenny Chesney, LeAnn Rimes were all opening acts for him, and he didn't really try to take credit in any sort of way for their success.
Yeah, like, come on, man. I had one intern in the radio game that is successful now, and I take so much credit for that. The fact that he didn't, and but it also shows, like, it is a little mic drop-ish when you're like, LeAnn Rimes opened up, Tim McGraw opened up for us,
Sure.
So it's half a dozen in one, six in the other, or whatever they say. I feel like either way, it's bragging. He doesn't even really have to, because the names are so big of who careers that he was a part of, and it's got to be cool for groups like that to come back around, and I'm sure that they're gonna, with this new record, play some shows, and they might play some shows with some of the people that once opened for them. Now they may be opening for, they may open for a Tim McGraw, right? Or no?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, certainly at festivals, this kinds of things happen. I mean, I remember one festival, Tracy Lawrence was either the direct support or maybe even a couple of supports for Tim McGraw, and Tim came out in his gym clothes and played a song with Tracy Lawrence at like 5 p.m. It was kind of neat. I mean, just to show him the love back. It was kind of cool. Yeah,
it is neat, man.
Do you wish that you had a little more? I mean, we didn't know Toby was going to be in the Hall of Fame when you talked to Mark Miller, but do you wish you had a few more questions for Mark? I mean, who knew they were such good friends, though? He was at the Vegas show and everything.
Yeah, I feel like he has like a lot of Toby stories. And the one thing that I've noticed since Toby passed is anyone that you ask about Toby, the first thing, they laugh. And, like they go, yeah, I got Toby's story. Everybody's got like a crazy Toby story. I mean, I've got one. When we interviewed Toby Keith, I was actually, my daughter had a play at her preschool, and the Toby Keith representative texted me and was like, "Can you go early?" And I had planned on interviewing him at home after I got home from the play, but they were like, "Can you go early?" And I was like, "All right." So as soon as the play was over, I snuck outside, interviewed Toby Keith from in my car, and listen to what he said at the end there.
I love it, man. Hey, thank you very much for taking the time, man. We truly appreciate you.
You're welcome, brother. Love
Legend.
that car seat. Love that baby seat in the back, man. That's yeah.
Thanks, man. I just went to my daughter's play.
Yeah. That'll get you. Hey, that's what you drive around town. That'll get you laid.
Yeah. Get out of here.
I didn't know what to say. Like, the first thing that came to my mind was, "Get out of here!" Like, I'm talking to Toby Keith. I gotta like hang up on him.
I did love your response there too, because it was a little out of character. I thought, which made it the whole thing on that video. We have that on our YouTube and our socials. That's a priceless memory. I mean, 2 months before he died, he was still cracking getting laid jokes.
Yeah. So if someone's ever like, I mean, I feel honored that if someone was ever like, "Do you have a Toby Keith story?" I would start out with how everybody tells me theirs with a laugh. I'm like, "Yeah, I got one."
Yeah.
Yeah, so I wish we could have asked more from Mark, about Toby Keith, but obviously, we didn't know he was going to be inducted into the Hall of Fame at the time of the interview, like you said. But that's what can you do? But it's good times, man.
Next time we'll get Mark on camera, I think. I mean, we had a lot of fun with Shenandoah and had some good clips, and Bellamy Brothers as well. It's good to have sort of. I don't know. I like the contemporary artists, but I love paying tribute a little bit to the 80s and 90s stars as well, and even the 70s stars who are still with us and still kind of actively making music. They have a place here because I think it's important to shine on them a little bit, maybe once a month with this show.
Yeah, I agree. Plus, their old interviews were done on like tape decks and filmed,
right?
On VHS. So now we're bringing them into the high def world, so bringing them right to you. And you can hear, in the past, we had Toby Keith on Taste of Country Nights on Demand. You can go back to some of the past interviews that we have had and just search for your favorite country artists anywhere where you get your podcast for Taste of Country Nights on Demand.